Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series that will air throughout the year in support of Cleveland Reads. Writers Unplugged is a chance to hear your favorite writers or new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on them in a coffee shop. Cleveland Reads is an initiative to improve the literacy levels in our community, and Mayor Bibb has challenged Clevelanders to read 1 million books or 10 million minutes this year. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian here at Cleveland Public Library. One of my favorite things besides reading is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially getting to know them better and see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. So I am so lucky this evening to be in conversation with bestselling author Liv Constantine, which is the pen name of two remarkable sisters, Lynne and Valerie. But before I get started, a couple of housekeeping notes to find out who else is visiting Writers Unplugged, both virtually and in person. Visit clevelandreads.com/unplugged. And Maxbacks Books on Coventry is our wonderful independent bookstore. They have copies of their books for you, so you can visit them in person or go to maxbacks.com. And then take a moment, let us know where you're watching us from, if you have questions about the characters, about the story, about the research. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to this dynamic duo. Liv Constantine, or Valerie and Lynne, are Wall Street Journal and USA Today international best-selling authors with over 1 million copies sold worldwide. They are Library Reads Hall of Fame authors, and their books have been translated into 28 languages, are available in 33 countries, and are in development for both television and film. Their books have been praised by the USA Today, Sunday Times, People Magazine, Good Morning America, among many others. And their debut novel, The Last Mrs. Parrish, is a Reese Witherspoon Book Club selection. So they are just as remarkable individually. Lynne has her master's in business from Johns Hopkins University and worked as a marketing executive. And she loves discovering coral reefs and shipwrecks all over the world. Valerie spent her career as a White House assistant in the president's scheduling and advanced planning, presidential trips, and travel, and she has visited over 40 countries. So both have wonderful dogs, and both of them enjoy reading. And so this is one of those cases where two dynamic backgrounds and interests do not cancel each other out, but combine their powers for good to weave compelling edge-of-your-seat stories. And I can remember getting an advanced copy of their debut, The Last Mrs. Parrish, and being stunned from the very beginning. And all I will say is the scene in the gym with the magazine, truly diabolical all the way to the last page. Then I met them in person, and I was agog with how brilliant Lynne and Valerie are and how kind they were to me as a reader. I've been a fan of theirs ever since, and I'm looking forward to talking to them this evening about their latest, The Senator's Wife. So please join me in a warm welcome to Valerie and Lynne.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, so great to see you.
Great to see you too. So I have to say, this is like a bucket list item to be here in conversation with the two of you.
Yeah.
So this is your latest. I'm holding up The Senator's Wife. Absolutely spectacular. Do you want to introduce a little bit without spoilers?
Sure, no spoilers.
No spoilers.
The Senator's Wife takes place in Washington, D.C., and our protagonist is Sloan Montgomery, who is a senator's wife twice. She lost her first husband 2 years ago in a tragic accident and is newly married and back in Washington. She's been dealing with lupus for the past 20 years, and as a result of the medicine she needs to take, now must undergo hip surgery because it has affected her bones. So they bring in a home health care worker named Athena, and all seems well. Athena seems perfect until Sloan starts slowly getting worse and having different symptoms that she never had before. And she begins to worry that perhaps Athena is not who she says she is, and maybe is even there to try to take over her life.
Wow.
Yes.
Well done. I mean, that's the thing with this book. Every time I try to explain it, there's so many layers. It's
Right.
like an onion. Like you try to explain this, but then there's this happening, and it unravels so brilliantly. So I think one of the things that's often said is that no two people read the same book, right? We all come to a book with our own experiences. Kind of it influences how we see things and how things resonate with us. So I begin to think about how that played out in your latest book.
You're right. Everybody comes to it with their own perceptions. And because the book is told from 4 different points of view,
Mhm.
then you have their perceptions, which are all different. So 4 narratives drive the story,
Yeah.
and they come from very different sides. So first we have Sloane, who is our protagonist, the one suffering with this hip problem and about to undergo surgery. And so we have her point of view and what's
Mhm.
going on in her life. And then we have her second husband, Whit Montgomery, who is the senator and very this handsome, charming,
Mhm.
very powerful, and well-liked senator
Mhm.
in Washington, whose uh, only concern is making sure that there is somebody who's going to be able to care for her while she's recuperating. And
Mhm.
then we have Athena, her point of view, and Athena is the home health care worker that they hire
Mhm.
finally. And from the very beginning, from Athena's point of view, that
Mhm.
she is not who she appears to be or who she's
Mhm.
presenting herself as. But we don't know. We know, but you don't know who, what her real purpose is, what she's after. And finally, we have Sloane's former mother-in-law, the mother of her late husband, and that's Rosemary. Rosemary's 82 years old, and Rosemary is a magnificent. We really loved Rosemary. I mean, she was a really great older woman who still has plenty of life in her,
Yes.
and she's suspicious of everybody, really. And so, who's telling the truth? Who's lying? Who's unreliable? And who's not?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I think you did a great job in the writing that as a reader, I frequently felt that I was off balance,
Mm,
right? Because you're telling it from 4 different points of view, and some of them are the same incidents but told from different perspectives,
right.
much less the whole story and some of the background. And so I'm constantly like, wait a second, how does this work?
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, it's the Constantine sisters. This is going to be absolutely brilliant, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, it's so well done. So where did the idea for this story come from? Oh, I was going to say, we talk about your background in DC.
Well, it's interesting though because originally the story was set in Connecticut,
Mhm.
and it did involve. We knew that we wanted uh, the kernel of the idea really came with the home health worker, somebody coming into your home
Yes.
and having some sort of agenda, but you didn't know what. And then with Sloane having her
Mhm.
illness, we wanted her to be married to somebody very powerful.
Mhm.
And of course, what's more powerful than a president, a senator, a vice president?
Yes.
And we set the story in Connecticut, and he was a senator from Connecticut, going back and forth to Washington. And finally, we looked at each other and said, "Why don't we just put the story in Washington? It makes it so much easier. Doesn't have to get on the train and go back and forth."
Yeah.
And that's why we made that the backdrop for it, the setting.
Yeah. It's well done. So I'm joined in conversation with Lynne and Valerie, known as Liv Constantine, for their book, The Senator's Wife. Can we talk a little bit about gaslighting?
Mhm.
This is something I think that people casually refer to, like it seems to be like the new trend, kind of like when people have a migraine, you just have a bad headache, right? Those of us who have migraines know all the things that are. So people say, "Oh, I'm being gaslit or gaslighting." Can you talk a little bit about how that theme played out in the book?
Sure. So some of the symptoms that Sloan starts to experience after her surgery are cognitive symptoms, which
Mhm.
can be a result of lupus inflammation because the lupus, she has systemic lupus, which can affect any organ of the brain. So, she at first believes, and for quite a while, that this is just something because of her lupus, and she doesn't really suspect any sort of gaslighting. But then as things begin to happen, that's when that wonder comes in. And of course, you've got, the home healthcare worker kind of being a not necessarily patronizing, but trying to tell her just, well, you need to rest. You need to not think too hard. You've got her husband who is telling her she's trying to look into some things. She has a foundation. She wants to know what's going on with her, with her work, and he's taking her computer away. And so she doesn't know, is he really looking out for me? But it does kind of feels like gaslighting. And I think, whatever kind of vulnerable position you find yourself in, that's when it's really even more, you're more susceptible to it. I mean, and you might not be being gaslit, but you certainly could feel that you are being gaslit when you can't even trust your own perceptions, which is what Sloane is struggling with. So how reliable is her own memory? How reliable are her senses right now? And yet she's being, kind of isolated more and more as the days go by and she's sicker. And on the one hand, maybe she's thinking, well, maybe this is appropriate because I've got to rest and the doctors are saying one thing. But on the other hand, it very much does feel like she's being gaslit. And you don't know necessarily from who and from which person, but yeah.
Right. I think that's the thing that's stunning is, did you by choice have her diagnosed with lupus, which could affect her cognitively? So it just added another layer of, my goodness, can I trust myself? Or is this because of my disease? Or is this because this is what I'm seeing and experiencing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We had like a dual. Yeah. That was the one of the reasons. And then we knew that it would be some sort of chronic illness that would present that. And we do have personal experience with lupus because we have a cousin who has been dealing with lupus since her 30s. And so we saw firsthand, and we wanted to bring awareness because there are times when she felt that way, like, she's feeling in a flare, but looks completely normal. And so, people don't necessarily understand if you look like you're healthy, but yet you can't do something, right? Or you can't get up and take care of things. People sometimes, even close, husbands, people in your family can assume like, oh, come on, you should just be able to get up and get on with it. And that's
right.
not the case.
And with reference to the gaslighting, I think when you have a character in a book who is either physically or psychologically stressed, that's when they can be taken advantage of and made to believe that their thinking is flawed somehow, or their memories are flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, I was just thinking about what Lynn said about being your most vulnerable. And I think so many times we think about home health care. And when you stop and really think, you're inviting somebody into your house that sees everything. It's not just somebody who's there for a couple hours. I mean,
Right.
this Athena came and stayed with her, like lived in the same house as her.
And the only that you have to go on is an agency's recommendation, or perhaps somebody who has recommended. We really don't know who's in our house.
Right. And so that kind of creeps me out a little bit as well, because I'm thinking like as the population ages, right, that this is something that's going to also come to the forefront. So like you're raising awareness for lupus. So I'm sending good wishes to your cousin. You're also raising awareness, I think maybe you didn't do it intentionally, but in terms of home health care, is how do you go through the process to make sure that that person is vetted and can be trusted and is also like a good fit? Because home health care, as much as it is about the task, is also about like that compatibility, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And if you remember, the senator does do an exhaustive background check. I mean, he does probably more research than most of us would do.
Exactly.
And
just because somebody has good credentials, even if the credentials are legitimate, that doesn't mean that they have good intentions necessarily, right? I mean, there have been plenty of stories of nurses and doctors who have been mercy killers, that kind of thing. So you can't really account, I mean, unless you're going to give somebody a deep psychological evaluation.
Right.
Even then, who knows? So, yeah.
Yeah. I felt off kilter the whole book, because I was like, oh God, I don't want to get old, and then I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to have,
or have surgery, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are all these things that I think one of the great things about books is that, it kind of brings up subjects that, we don't normally talk about, right? We don't normally talk about home health care or necessarily what we're afflicted with. And so talking with the amazing Liv Constantine, the senator's wife, just so excited. And the cover, I mean, the fact
Isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful, right? And so I couldn't help but think, obviously it's set in DC and you have what appears to be the cherry blossoms.
Yeah.
Just so well done. How much influence do you all have on the cover of a book?
They ask for they show us the mock-ups,
Right.
and I don't think that they would ever put a cover on that we said, oh, we really don't like that, but we loved this. So there were, we went through a couple of iterations on the theme. And then, and I think the broken glass came last. That was,
it was definitely, I mean, they're very, it's very collaborative. I mean, and, our editor, in fact, just asked us for our next book for ideas. So they, it's a really, very much so a team effort all the way through. And we're really grateful for that because, they are, but everybody, and a lot of the designs that they sent, there were others that they were beautiful too. And we were like, oh, wow. Like each one you would look at would be more striking than the next. But this one was the one I think that just really kind of got the whole feel of the book and the vibe of the book and said everything immediately. And everybody on the whole team is crazy about it. So it's,
it's so well done. And that's the thing I love. I mean,
towels with it and bags with it's
absolutely. I mean, and not that we as librarians or readers ever judge a book by its cover, right? But it's like, but there are books where you will walk through and it's striking. And that's what this does, because there's something very beautiful, right, about the blossoms. And then you have like the jagged glass and you're like, wait a second. So you have like two opposite things that can be true at the same time.
Right.
That's right.
So, and sometimes that's hard to wrestle with, I think, in our minds. We'll talk a little bit about Whit and Sloane. So Whit is her second husband, but was her first husband's best friend. I feel like there are times you need to, but I guess I'm struck by, I know several people who have ended up marrying after they've been, widowed, that their, spouse's best friend. I mean, it's not an uncommon.
Right.
And I think when that happens, that probably one of the advantages of that is that you can still talk together about the spouse who is deceased. There's no sort of jealousy or feeling on either side that, I'm competing with this person who has died, but because that was a friend and they both loved this man, and that's something that they can still have and yet be together. So it's probably comforting, I would think.
I would think that scene though, where her first husband, is this a spoiler if I say this?
I don't know what you're going to say.
The first scene where she lost her first husband.
No, I don't think that's a spoiler because we know.
Because she ends up with Whit, so I guess not. But shocking, stunning. Did not see that coming at all. And I was like, "Holy cow!" Like, and this is like early on, so I'm like,
well, and that this book went through many revisions before it even got to our final editor. And initially, you never saw Robert alive in our earlier books. And so it started off when she was already married to Whit. And then, and except for in her flashbacks and memories. And then we just thought, really, we wanted to show that. It made more sense to start, even though it was 2 years earlier, to really be able to get a glimpse into what that relationship was like and and a little bit of what Robert was like. And so that was, so I guess, to us, it wasn't shocking because we always knew it, but I suppose for the reader, I guess it was a little bit jarring.
Wow, they're already killing their characters. Haven't even started.
Right.
And I think, I thought it was well done. And then the other thing that adds the element is the fourth narrator, right, is Rosemary, who was her first husband's mother,
mom,
right? So then there's another layer of somebody else who was close to both Sloane and her son, and now she sees Sloane with somebody else, and so there's some complicated feelings that go there as well.
Did you like Rosemary?
I loved Rosemary. I thought there was something about her that was a little bit I don't even know if this is appropriate to say, like a little bit Olive Kittredge, right? A little bit hard, but ended up like once you saw, you realized she had this big heart.
Right.
And so she was doing things. There was a bit of an edge.
She definitely has, yeah, she's, stiff upper lip to a point, right? And stoic and speaks her mind and
Yeah.
unequivocal, like, really believes what she believes and what's right is right. But yeah, but a good person.
Yeah, absolutely. She was my favorite in the book. If we can pick favorites.
Oh, we
Yeah,
love her.
I really liked her. Really, really liked her.
Nice.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
so I'm talking. I can't not hold this up. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. So The Senator's Wife, which just, released. The other interesting dynamic, and we talk about layers and connections of things, is that Sloane's best friend is Robert's sister, Camille. So like, oh, what a tangled web we weave. Right? So how did that become part of the story, that there was so much closeness with, I
Well, I
don't know
think
how else. Yeah,
a lot of those, I mean, the families were close, right? And
very
then
close.
they grew up with a lot of wealth. And I
Yeah,
think often that's true, that a lot of, they socialize in the same circles. And so
right.
we quite like the idea of, of her, she and Camille growing up and being best friends together, and her having this crush on Robert for all those years, a little older, right? And
Yeah.
kind of looking at her as she's a teenager, as a pest, and then all of a sudden one day she's all grown up, right? And it was kind of like a boy next door romantic.
It's true, because I think about some of the friends I had growing up, and their older brothers and how cute they were, right? I think it's something that kind of all resonates with us, just some of us got that, like, all grown up and caught up with them again, and some
Nothing
of us didn't.
happened.
Exactly.
I had younger brothers, so it didn't work for me, but Lynn had older brothers. So
I had a crush on my one brother's best friend for years. I mean, and then it's so funny because our sister-in-law actually dated him. I mean, of course she didn't marry him, she married our brother, but it was so funny. We laugh and we
tell me, you have to give me this person's name after we.
I will.
Okay.
Off camera.
Off camera, exactly. So one of the things that you reference in this book, right, is a term called conspicuous consumption, right? That reflects kind of the lifestyle. So we're just kind of segueing, I didn't mean to do that, but into how they lived, and with such wealth and such opulence. Why was it important? I guess maybe because of his background, both of them being senators, it was important to capture that type of lifestyle.
I mean, I think for wit, well, I think one of the things that we wanted to dig into is what is it like for someone like Wit, who didn't grow up that way? Not that he grew up in, with really lacking things, but he did not grow up in the same sort of thing. And now he finds himself best friends with somebody who, the ease of wealth and some of the things that when you have all of that, you don't even stop to think about it, as compared to someone who doesn't grow up with it. And it's just, everything is sort of easy. And, and then again, that sort of adds to Rosemary's suspicion, whether it is legitimate or not, that, he's stepping into my son's house and living his life and taking over. And she, and has he been envious? Has he always been looking at it? And I think we do explore in a lot of our books, I don't want to say the haves and the have-nots, that's not really it, but just, people that are up in this echelon, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is perfect, right?
Right.
Problems like anyone else. And
And I think too, I mean, I think it's always interesting to bring the glamour into it, which of course that does. The more wealth that there is, the more, the homes are more beautiful, the cars, the clothing, all of that. But we really did want Robert and Sloane to come from a tradition where it was to value, to be appreciative of what they had been born with. And in one part, Sloane's father says to her, always remember to use things and love people, never the other way around. And this whole thing of having to give back.
Right.
And so that was an important thing, I think, too.
Right. And her whole passion is put into this foundation of helping other women, and not only just putting money into it, but putting blood, sweat, and tears, to the point that she put herself in danger, right? Going to the home of a woman that had called her when her husband had, was attacking her. And Robert initially says to her, you should never have done that. And she says, I'm always going to be there if someone needs me like that. You just have to accept that. So I think, Sloane is no one can take credit or blame for how they're or what they're born into, but it's really what you do with that. And Sloane, I think, does a lot with that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was one of the great things about the book is the foundation and how important it was to her. And there was a quote in her dad's office. I can't remember what it was, that something that he said to her. I'm blanking on it at the moment, but
yeah. With something what you leave behind.
Something to that. And I think it's important is that, to your point, that Sloane and Robert didn't take their wealth for granted. Whereas Whit, it just seemed to have come easily to him. He worked hard to get where he was. And then once Robert was, we'll say, out of the picture or whatever, and I think that's what Rosemary kind of objected to.
Yes.
Especially because he was there when Robert, right? I mean, there were four, those two couples were in that room together. So I just,
Yes.
Right. I know. Can't say.
I know.
But speaking of wealth, I know we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but the fashion references that you all, I mean, what was that research like, right? Because I started looking at my closet after reading what was referenced in the book and went, oh no, I'll never be a senator's wife, right?
Yeah, same here, really.
Same here. But here's what I found, and I had to write it down. It's the Delval metal stud bag. Sloane takes it to the doctor's office, and I was like, so every time you reference something, I mean, some of the stuff we know, we know the red bottom shoes, and we, like some of the stuff was like way out there. And I'm like, oh, that is stunning. Oh my goodness, I have to have it. It's just unbelievable. So how did you approach that research to make sure you had the right pieces? And
for Sloane, we wanted it to be quiet wealth. Not something that was so in your face, overt. And so whenever we find something that we've never heard of that's really expensive,
yes,
that's sort of like, oh, that probably, and because this was a handbag that has nothing on it. You really on the outside you would never know what it is. It wasn't until it was opened and someone looked inside of it and they saw a little thing of a little name inside, which seems, that is something I think that a lot of people of that kind of means buy something that's very expensive, but it doesn't really show on the outside.
There's something very understated and classy
about it. Yeah, right. Yes, right.
Right, which is just nice to see. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that is.
And it's it's something too that you don't have to show. They have the, I don't know, the either attitude or confidence or whatever it says. It's like, I don't have to show you how wealthy I am. I don't have to have this handbag that has a name on it or that everybody knows, oh, that was $100,000, but I know that it's good. It's something of quality, and that's
distinctive, like a distinctive enough that, and I think it suits her. And we'll talk a little bit about how you develop characters, because I think it suits her in the way that she approaches things and the way that she seems to be very genuine, very down to earth, knows what she has, and then wants to do good with it.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just wondering if those companies start sending you samples.
I wish.
Not yet. I wish.
Not yet.
But I will tell you something funny that happens is that, we look up homes in whatever area we're working, wherever the setting is. And so every day at least half of the emails I get are from realtor.com telling me about a beautiful home in Malibu or in Georgia. Wouldn't you love to buy this one?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So I'm joined in conversation with Lynne and Valerie Constantine, known as Liv Constantine, with The Senator's Wife, which just released. Is it 2 weeks old? Not quite 2 weeks.
I think it's almost 3 now. Well, 3 tomorrow.
I know, like we're women, we round down with age, right?
Right. May 23rd. Yeah.
Because we have Memorial Day weekend in between everything. So
so that kind of threw me. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach developing characters, especially when you're doing 4 different points of view?
You want to start?
Sure. So, I mean, we spend a lot of time before we even begin to write, developing, setting characters, storyline. And, we do the typical, what do they look like? What's their education? Some family background. We try to throw some trauma in there, and we shape them as best we can. But a lot of I'd say that gets us maybe 60% of the way there. And the rest of it really does come just through the writing.
Mhm.
And so we do many, many revisions. And oftentimes as we're writing, and we share our work every day, we email back and forth. One might say to the other, well, that doesn't really sound like Sloane, or, let's think about that. And it will get refined until we hear their voice. And Rosemary came very easily. She just was fully formed, I think. Athena also, and Wit. But Sloane was the one that took the most time and really evolved over the period of 2 years that it took to write this book. And that was in large part because of us giving her this chronic illness that we did not want to define her, but certainly was going to impact her. And we
Right.
wanted to make sure that she was, that we gave her enough in time and space in the book where she was feeling better, where she could do the things that she wanted to do and live her life and have the agency to move forward. And so I think, again, primarily it was difficult because initially in the first round, we had her sick from the beginning. As I said, we didn't show you what it was like before.
Yeah.
And really hard when you're very sick for people to get to know you and to be who you really are, right? Because
Right.
that takes over, shadows everything. So that once we changed things up and allowed her to feel, to have more uptime, then she showed herself to us and really became very, beloved to us.
Yeah. The first round of when we were writing, and it was set in Connecticut, and as Lynn said, we started the book right from the time that she was married to her second husband, and she was sick and she was in bed. And I remember, because of course we do a draft and then we read everything, and we're reading it, and I think we both said to each other, "She's in bed all the time.
This is
Not
not
good."
good.
So that was it, but just Lynn's right. That was the character that we had that took the longest to really develop and make a real human being with facets.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. And I think that's one of the great things about reading is being able to see all those different facets of the character, right? Like, you can kind of see inside their head, so to speak, to understand kind of why they're behaving the way they are, why they're doing what they're doing, which I think is so special when writers are able to capture that. So somebody who you might think is quote unquote bad, when you as a writer allow me to see kind of their thought process, then you end up liking them or kind of liking them or understanding them a little bit better. So
Right.
And it's kind of like all of us, right? I don't think many of us are all bad or all good. I think there's facets.
Right.
And I think that's why your books have done so well, is that they resonate with us, right? There's some sort of facet that, oh my gosh, that's totally me, or that's totally how I would think I would act, right? So let's talk about your writing process, right? Because I'm talking to two of you who publish under one name, and your sisters. So how do you approach writing a book? I know you said you'd talk a little bit before about characters, but how does that process work?
Well, we talk a lot before.
Right.
And really it starts with the story. Starts with a twist, usually, in almost every case. And so we know the twist, the big twist from the beginning. And then the little twists come along the way. And we talk about where the story, where it starts, where it's going to go, but very broadly. And we don't do a detailed outline.
Okay.
We did that with our very first book 20 some years ago. And then it felt like, oh, we can't deviate from this. And that's not a good thing in our case anyway.
Right.
Because it just allows when you have a very general outline, it's an organic process where the characters it sounds kind of crazy and woo-woo, but the characters do kind of lead you where they're going to go. And so that takes a few months actually
Mhm.
to develop the story and talk about the characters
Right.
and name them and all of that. And then the writing process begins, and I'll let Lynn take over on the writing process.
Sure. So typically we speak in the morning, we Zoom. We used to FaceTime, but then the pandemic hit and we all rediscovered Zoom. Uh, right. So once we're ready to start the actual writing, we'll talk and I'll say, okay, how about I write this scene? You write that scene. We hang up, we go in our writing caves, we write, and then we email each other. And then usually we also speak, unless something's going on, we'll speak at the end of the day to talk about what we've just read that each other has written. We also always send it and say, feel free to edit it, add anything you like. And oftentimes we'll do that in track changes and then send it back to the other person who will do that. And then this goes on until we finish a first draft. And the other thing that's fun is that if I might write something and get stuck or just get bored with the scene, and I'll email Val and say, do you want to finish this? And she'll say, sure. And so
Right.
You get
or she'll send me some dialogue and say, can you punch this up a little bit? And I'll do that. Or I'll send something to her where we're in a new setting, a new place. And I'll say, I don't really love doing the description. So I'll just put all in caps, describe the room, describe this. So it goes back and forth, we play to each other's strengths, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is.
And then we finish, we try to know, like, once we're starting, we'll say, okay, we're going to write this amount every day, and we should be at a first draft by this time. And we do try to stick to that schedule because we know we're going to go through it 2 or 3 more times, and there are going to be more and more changes before we even give it over to our agent. And then our agent's going to have changes, and then we're going to have to give it to our editor. So now we're in our next project, we're on our 3rd round. So we have to read it once again and hopefully send it off. Yeah.
Right.
I imagine that's a lot to juggle, right? Because you're basically now kind of touring virtually and in person to talk about this book, and yet at the same time you have to kind of keep in your head the characters for what you said the 3rd go through.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of a bit much.
You're usually working on something while you're touring.
Yeah.
We've always found that to be.
Well, and I think it's interesting if you talk in the morning and then you talk at the end of the day. I mean, it's really nice to have that accountability. I mean, not to say that, but there's just something to know, like, okay, I'm doing this because I know somebody else needs this. Not like, that's all right, I'll get to it tomorrow. And it's
right.
That's so true. Yes.
Do you all take turns writing characters, or
we write scenes? We go chapter by chapter.
Okay, that explains, because when I'm reading, and I'll hold this up again, right? The Senator's Wife, Liv Constantine, is that it's consistent, right? Like it doesn't come across as a different style or choppy, right? Like if I were to write something and my sister were to write something, they, I think, would sound pretty different. But being able, I mean, maybe it's because your sisters, and this is book number 5.
Book number 5, yeah, and 6 if you count our first, early book. So yeah, and I think I
don't think I read the first early book. I'm embarrassed to say I have not read that.
Okay.
I was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think being sisters, and we have a similar sense of humor. There is but it also, I think because we edit each other's work as well, so that really both of us are on every page. And so I think that makes, and so it works. It just, I don't know. I guess our styles must be similar as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Or because you've worked together for so
that they've become,
you cannot tell, like, oh, this is a Valerie sentence and this is a Lynne chapter. So you said, if I'm correct, that you write by scene.
Right.
So do you split it up like each character? I'm just trying to.
So chapters more so, where not necessarily splitting up scenes in a chapter, although sometimes we do if one finishes it. So, and the chapters can move around a bit, but no, I mean, there might be a day like I might write 3 Rosemary scenes in a row, and Valerie's working on Athena, or she's working on, but it all ends up I mean, it's not like we figure out, okay, you have to write this many. It's just whatever, like we know what's going to happen the next day. And
Right.
whoever seems more excited about writing that particular scene or seems more apt.
Mhm.
So any sex scenes, of course, Valerie's always
Lynne
writing.
writes. Right.
I was going to ask, but
She
Yeah.
always tries to get that in first with it.
I got it in first and
I know what
right.
they say about that protesting lady. Yes.
Right.
yeah,
No, not that there are any our style. The door closes pretty quickly, so it's not like there's anything that graphic. But
Right.
no, I mean, it just you can just sometimes we can just tell when we're saying, all right, this is going to happen that, and one is like, okay, I think this should go like this, and this, and then the other will say, well, okay, you want to just write that chapter then?
Right.
Okay.
that's a great way to work, because that person's excited about what they're writing and not, I want to say, slogging through, like,
Right.
but it makes a difference.
It definitely, you want to feel, I mean, clearly there are some times when you're writing something and it is difficult and you have
Right.
to get through it, but it is a lot more fun when you can and feel that excitement. And I do think it comes across on the page.
And I'm sure, like, the fact that you are writing it at the same time with each other, there has to be that sense of like excitement when you're sending Lynne what you wrote to Valerie and vice versa, like, oh my gosh, this is really great. Right. There's that sense of excitement just with each other, because a lot of times a lot of people write and it's a solitary pursuit.
Exactly.
And they sit with it. And sometimes you're so close to it that you can't always see, but it's almost like you're still close to it, but yet you have a different perspective because you didn't write the actual words, even though you knew where it was headed.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's true. And it's a great feeling when when you get an email back saying, oh, great chapter. Like, sometimes it's like,
That's all that goes back, right? There's never like, ooh.
Yeah. No, sometimes it'll just be like,
well, this could use some work. But
yeah. So
you can use some work.
Yeah. But
And you really know, when you send a chapter that needs work.
That's really good. And it's always fun to, and sometimes we'll even say, let's get on Zoom and I want you to read it while I'm watching you, because we want to see the reaction of the other person.
That's awesome. That's really kind of fun.
Yeah.
Very fun. Yeah. How do you resolve? Is there ever like times where you have a difference of opinions?
Sure is. Yeah.
Is it like rock, paper, scissors?
Often, but of course we do. And I think that we're pretty good about coming to a conclusion without having any kind of rancor or hostility or anything.
You wouldn't be still writing together if that was the case.
No, we wouldn't. It wouldn't be fun. And there have just been, maybe 2 or 3 times when we really both dug our heels in and thought, no, I'm standing by my position. And so in a case like that, we send it to our editor, and we don't say who's saying which, and they make the decision. So that hasn't happened often.
No. Wow. So I'm joined, Liv Constantine, also known as Lynne and Valerie in real life, with the senator's wife, talking a little bit about your writing process. That first draft, because you said this book took you 2 years to write.
It did.
So how long does it take for that first draft before you would give it to your agent? Is that like a year long?
It depends. I mean, with each book. So it can be 6 months, or it could be up to a year.
Okay.
Right. I mean, and I think, I would say probably the average is about 9. Wouldn't you say, Valerie?
Sometimes less. Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah.
First draft for the first draft. Sometimes less.
No, to give it to our agent.
Oh, to give it to the agent. Okay. Because it usually goes through at least 3 drafts. Wouldn't you say?
So I would say 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
And then time editing and kind of crafting and honing and whatever your process is, it's spectacular, and it makes me sad to say that it takes me a little bit less than 9 months to read one of your books.
Well, that would be terrible if it took you 9 months to read.
Oh my God. No, we're talking like, okay, guess what? Like having cereal for dinner because I can't stop. And that it's that chapter and that alternating perspective that keeps me flipping, because you leave me on a cliffhanger and I go to the next one. I was like, well, then there's her cliffhanger, then to the next one. So you say what the twist is when you start.
Mm-hmm.
Does it ever change? Don't worry, no spoilers.
It doesn't, I don't think the major twist has ever changed in our book, but we have had a book in which the killer changed after a couple rounds.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that was so I guess in a sense, yes.
After it was turned in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
And that was as a result of our realizing that the character would not have done that. So we had to redo it. But and then on the wife stalker, we changed the ending a little bit. It didn't really change the twist, but we left it a little bit more ambiguous at the end. So
Yeah,
that
right.
was fun to work with. Yeah.
But other than, otherwise, I think everything has pretty much stayed. The major twist was
Mhm.
What's it like living with the characters? Like, I'm sure like your brain probably never turns off.
you dream about them.
I would
Right.
imagine.
It's
Mhm.
fun. I think. I mean, it's interesting. I think for me, I've had a varied career between corporate marketing and all in different jobs. And what I always liked was to go in and figure out what was wrong and solve it. And then I don't want to manage it anymore. It's like, okay, give me a new problem. So what's so great with is no matter what's going on, like when the pandemic, when we were all stuck inside,
Yeah.
it was a real godsend to have a book to work on and have new people to meet that weren't
Yeah.
going to, you didn't have to worry about catching COVID from. And so it's just, I think it enriches your world, our world so much more. I really love that. And I do feel like there really are people and,
Yeah, I do
Are
too.
the characters from all your previous books still with you, or do they kind of take a bit of a back seat?
some are more than right. Parrish, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and of
Well,
course,
Especially since we're working on.
we're working on the,
Uh,
yeah, some more than, but usually it is the book that we're in, right?
Right. Yeah,
That's the
I think
most.
so. Yeah.
yeah,
We were talking and saying it would be fun. Our Valerie's son was saying wouldn't it be fun to bring them all together? We were saying we should do like a White Lotus type of a
yes,
so
thank you.
different groups from all the books, wouldn't they? Yeah.
I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be fun. Yeah. A little
Yeah,
complicated.
A little
or
complicated.
I think it'd be amazing to kind of mix up some of the characters and
Right. Yeah.
see how they would react with the other
Yeah.
ones and
Have them all on vacation together or something.
Mhm.
exactly. Well, it just makes me think like I'm old, so I grew up with like the real world, and it's like like 7 characters from
Right.
Liv Constantine picked to live in a house.
That would be interesting,
Right?
right?
Wouldn't that be fun?
Mhm.
So, did you always know you wanted to write thrillers?
No. Mm-mm.
Did
We
you
didn't
always
know-
want to
we
be
didn't-
writers?
We didn't know we'd written a thriller for
Okay.
Parrish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just felt like we wrote a book of fiction. And our agent said, this is a thriller. And we said, okay, that's.
Yeah, she said it's a psychological thriller. I mean, I did write another book that is a thriller. I wanted to write thrillers too, but like I think both we wanted to write, but neither of us we were big readers, and
Mhm.
our mom took us to the library every
Aw.
week. And they were the best times, and we'd all pick our books out. And then as we got older, we would all read the same book and talk about it. And that was sort of what segued into writing, because Valerie and I were reading a lot of books about families and in different ethnicities. And I said to her one day, there really isn't a book about a Greek family. We should write one. And so she said, all right. So we went and bought a book called How to Write and Sell Your First Novel. This was like 20 years ago. And we read the book and we wrote Circle Dance, which is the book that,
Okay, so now it's the book I'm going to order when we're done. As
Remember,
I will say tomorrow, not right now. Right?
okay, first book, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a nice family saga, but
Yeah.
early book. So, it's why we don't promote it too. But people do love the family, and those characters are still very much with us. That's such an old
Because they were all taken from our family. Right?
which they were composites of our family, but the women were not us.
Yeah.
The women were not, the 2 women are not us. It's 2 sisters.
Right.
So that's how we got started in writing. So that was not a thriller. And then years later, when we came back together, I'm
trying to think of how that would say this. Does it bother you that it's defined as a thriller? Because sometimes,
no, and
from a librarian standpoint,
it
sometimes
doesn't.
we need to put a genre on something, because we feel like if we just put it in fiction, people are going to find stuff that they wouldn't normally pick up if it was put in like the mystery section, right?
I think it's good
That's
to have.
true.
Yeah, it has to have, people have to know, like, they're going to expect something different. But I think Parrish is actually characterized as fiction, like on Apple Books. It's not in the mystery thriller. And this book, one of the categories on Amazon is friendship fiction.
Ooh.
So even though it is it's all of it. It's psychological fiction, it's domestic suspense. So
Yeah, but I was thinking about this today, about how we really have, made all of these little kind of nooks of genre and subgenre and sub. And in a way, it's sort of unfair to the book, because when you think about a book like Wuthering Heights or
Yeah.
Rebecca, which today would be considered psychological thriller.
Correct.
Yeah, and so someone who's really not looking for that, or says, that's really not my genre to read, would never pick that book up.
Right.
And yet they're classics, and so I just wonder about how terrific that might, or not terrific that is, that we are making it so much of a micro genre sort of thing. And what do you? I mean, you're the, with your experience at the library.
Well, I know at the library, and Heather is joining and said, after listening to this conversation, she wants to go and read all of your books.
oh,
Yay.
Thank you.
Yay. Yes, thank you, Heather. Yeah, it's funny. Mystery writers in particular, or mystery readers, tend to want a mystery section. Whereas as a librarian, I just want a fiction section, because what I truly want, and one of the best parts of my job, is like talking to somebody who, wants to read something, and can you recommend a book? And then you start to figure out, well, what makes them tick? What do they read? Do they read for character? Do they read for story? Do they read for setting? Do they read for language? And then you find the right book for them. And so they may have gone in saying, I want a mystery, and you hand them something else, but it's what they want to read. They just can't always say that.
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, I know there are people that like mysteries, and so will flock to that section. So it's
you do something very special there's an independent bookstore, and probably a lot of independent bookstores do this, but one that I work with here in Annapolis, or Severna Park, and she is very much like that. She will talk to the reader and get information, and then say, well, you might like this, and it's something that they would not have picked up. But that doesn't happen in the big stores, where there really is, there's an information table, but they're not going to do the same thing that maybe you would find in a small bookstore where they've all read the books and
right.
more. Yeah.
Right. So that's a takeaway. Support local independent bookstores, first of all.
Absolutely.
But it's one of the best parts. And so I'm, a product of Nancy Pearl, who, has her own action figure as a librarian, right? Like one day maybe, but she talks about that. There's basically 4 ways, and it's either through character, through setting, through story, or through language. And some of those worlds can overlap.
Yes.
Right. But I think one of the things that you do remarkably well is that you combine those, right? You have these characters that are not flat. They're not one-dimensional, that they're very human and faceted, as Valerie, as you said earlier. And at the same time, there's this incredible storyline that's pacing. And then you give us a glimpse into the setting and the world of, like, to say, like, lifestyles of the rich and famous, right? with these clothes and these handbags, and the shoes and the cars and the homes that have to be absolutely spectacular. So and then the language, the dialogue that sounds genuine, right? That's really how people talk. It doesn't come across as stilted. So yeah, I say, like, no matter who picks up one of your books, in particular the newest, The Senator's Wife, and then if this is a new writer to you, then go back and read all the backlist. And the scene in the gym with the magazine, that's, to this day, you kind of set like the gold standard for, I can't believe she did that. So yeah, very well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I want to first of all just say thank you, for being so generous with your time. this is supporting Cleveland Reads, right? Where the mayors challenge Clevelanders to read more, to fall in love with reading again. So can you talk a little bit about why literacy is important to you all?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I know.
I mean, books for me, have been just something that has always been an escape, and no matter what I was going through, I could always have a book with me. And it's so important. My daughter has dyslexia, and for a long time, she could not read. And I mean, I'm getting like choked. It was, it was really tough because she loves, story. And so she learned, and then to see her devour books after that, was just so heartwarming. So
Yeah.
wasn't planning on getting off for clapped.
Discuss books.
Yeah. So.
So important. And reading to children. I mean, my boys are all, grown, out on their own, and so many times have said to me, thank you for reading to me when I was little. And I think it's so thrilling to see, like, now I have an 8-year-old granddaughter who found, she was struggling with reading. It wasn't so much that she was struggling, but she couldn't find anything that really held her interest, that she loved. And finally there was a series that came along, and she read the first book, and she's like tearing through them now. And that is so exciting to see somebody get excited by a book, and then they blossom into a reader. And I mean, let's face it, reading, it's everything. You learn, you're entertained, you
travel to places you might not be able to travel to.
Yeah,
you move in circles you might not be able.
Yeah.
That's special. And that's one of the things, like when a kid comes in and you can introduce them to a series, right? And a lot of times kids can't articulate the same way adults can with like character or setting. So you ask them what TV shows they like or what movies they like, right? You'd never sit a kid down unless they truly wanted to watch that documentary on, the animals, right? Like you wouldn't make them do that. You'd want them to be entertained and to enjoy, right? Otherwise they'd never watch TV, So it's the same kind of approach with books. Sometimes it just takes a minute till they find what they love, and then look out.
Off to the races then.
Off to the races. Yeah, I kind of feel that way. Like after BoucherCon, I was like, this is so. We met at BoucherCon, for those of you listening and watching. It's a mystery writers conference where readers can go to, and it's like the Disney World of, if you're a mystery reader, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. You get to meet the people. There's these amazing discussions with panels, and then the other thing that's really cool to see as a reader is the camaraderie that you all share as writers with each other. Yeah. It's a great community. You support, you encourage. It's terrific.
Yeah.
So even though like what you write is sometimes a little bit dark, you are like the kindest people I think I've ever met. And I'm trying to match that up with what's on the page is not what is in real life. And so
thank you.
So we'll move to the final 5 questions. So what was the first conversation like when you said, oh, let's write a book together? How did that start?
Right. We were excited.
Yeah. We said, sure, why not? Let's try it. And that's what,
Yeah. What's it like when you see somebody reading your book?
We still haven't. We haven't.
Okay, wait, hold on.
Like we get pictures from people.
Everyone we know has seen that. Right. We'll get a text. Oh, I've been on the beach and someone's reading your book.
Yeah.
When is that going to happen to us?
So we were hoping. We did see someone buying our book in the bookstore.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
That's
the closest we've
which is the independent bookstore that Valerie was talking about. And so I did turn around and I said, oh, would you like us to sign that? She's like, oh my gosh, are you the author? I said, yes. So that was fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I think it would be to heal everybody.
Oh, that's a good one. I was going to say flying, but yours is better.
I like flying too. You could take her. You could fly with her to heal people. Right? It's that whole sister thing, right?
Yeah. If you fall, I'll heal you. So you'll be all right.
What book besides yours? What book do you think everybody should read, and why?
I I think everybody should read What Alice Forgot, especially women, just because it's such a poignant look. It's funny, it's entertaining, but this whole idea of who you are and what you've done with your life without saying more. I just love that book.
It is, yeah, she's good. She's somebody I'd like to meet. Yeah, I just think all the stuff that she writes is just so well. Like you all.
Yeah.
Lynn.
There's so many, but the one that comes to mind is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so good. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Lynn, what shipwreck is still on your bucket list to be discovered?
What
Shipwreck?
I have to say, I don't think I have that on my bucket list.
All right.
Yeah.
Nope. I don't have an answer for that. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Valerie, what one country have you visited that you would like to move to?
Move to? Maybe Portugal.
Oh, I liked Portugal.
Or Greece.
Yeah.
Greece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where would you go?
Oh, that's a good question. Still so much to be seen. Portugal, I liked a lot.
Yeah, well, I went to Portugal.
I loved.
Okay, we're meeting in Portugal.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to say thank you to both Lynn and Valerie, writers. Oh my gosh, upside down. That's good. People who are listening won't know that happened. Liv Constantine, writers of The Senator's Wife. If they are new to you, get caught up. You will not be sorry. Every single one is amazing. I want to thank you to our tech team, also known as Mike, for making sure everything looked good, sounded good. And then thanks to all of you who are watching and listening to Writers Unplugged and sharing your love of reading with one another. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm with Cleveland Public Library. Happy reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
With you.